it. Oh, go on, say it. He won't mind.
He won't mind?
Well, sure. Why would he?
Well, I thought maybe there'd be lightning bolts, something.
Again with the Old Testament stuff. Come on, just, admit it.
Okay. I don't believe in God.
Dude, you're so toast. What? I can't believe you just said that.
But you said...
What did... Shoo. Pneumatic tube, man.
Wait a minute.
I'm just messing with you. I don't believe in him either.
You don't believe in...
I believe in God. I just don't believe in the God that's the same God as the God that you don't believe in, too.
During recess at the old Central Elementary School in Pike Township when the question was first put to me. Somewhere between the monkey bars and the merry-go-round, neither of which is allowed on school playgrounds today, I think, one of my little friends fired off a challenge. Do you believe that nothing is impossible for God? All my years of Sunday school and vacation Bible school go to waste. Of course, I replied. Well then, he asked, can God build a ladder that he can't climb? Now, I'm sure the first thought that comes to the mind of all of you out there is, why are two fifth graders debating theology on a playground? Why weren't you playing kickball or something? Yeah, I don't know. It's just the crowd I hung with. But back to the question. Can God build a ladder that he can't climb? Well, now that's a trick question, isn't it? If he can't build it, then he can't do everything. But if he can build a ladder that he can't climb, then he still can't do everything. Either way, something is impossible for God. Quite a conundrum. Those of us in the major religious communities of the country and the world tend to rattle off rather reflexively that God is perfect, God knows everything, God can do everything, but the ladder that God can't climb gives the lie to those statements, or at least exposes our lack of understanding of what we're saying. Can we really confidently claim to know something about God that we can't explain or even imagine? And if not, can we claim to know that there really is a God at all? What is God? Who or what is it that we claim to believe in or not believe in? Well, I've known for a full year what I was going to talk about this morning. I've read books, watched videos, even conducted an interview to prepare. And then something happened about a month ago to make me throw it all out the window and start over. I discovered the Heartland YouTube channel, the collection of previous sermons recorded over the last several years. And as I was scrolling through them, 3 of your relatively recent talks caught my eye, enough for me to sit down and watch each of them in their entirety and more than once. The first is Everything Conscious by Dr. Kevin Perrone, and I think I'm pronouncing his name right, I hope. A second, I'm an Atheist, or Am I, by your own Dick Wolfsey. And the third, God in Transformation by Angela Nevitt Meyer, which I got to tell you, I did a double take when I saw her. I know Angela from a show we did together in community theater over 20 years ago, and I had no idea she had this little side gig as an ordained Catholic priest. Of course, now I am ordained by the online Universal Life Church, but that was, as my daughter once described it on Facebook, quote, a beautiful, deeply spiritual, 2-minute-long process, end quote. I have a sneaking suspicion that Angela put in a little more time and effort. Anyway, I was completely blown away by these talks. I mean, I've had to listen to my fair share of boring and flat-out bad sermons in my day. In fact, I've probably delivered more than a few of them. So I can tell you guys that if this is the quality you're getting week after week, you are lucky. And they all got me to thinking about the ways that these talks were connected, about the things I agreed with and the things that I didn't, which I imagine is at least part of the hope and intention of any of us who stand in this pulpit to give a talk on a Sunday morning. In the UU tradition, differing beliefs here are encouraged, even celebrated. And that's great. That's a good thing. It means you're keeping your minds open. It means that on your own paths to truth, you're willing to consider other ideas and opinions, and you're willing to listen to other people. But it also means that this Sunday morning, you're stuck with listening to me. And what you're going to find, if nothing else, is this. I'm not as intellectual as Dr. Perone. I'm not even remotely as poetic or theologically well-versed as Angela. And, of course, I'm nowhere near as good-looking as Dick Wolfsey. The movie clip you just saw is from a comedy/drama that I wrote for the stage over a decade ago. It was later turned into an independent film called The Dealer Smiles, which of course draws its title from the passage I read earlier, a passage about our misunderstanding, indeed our utter lack of comprehension of God. In the movie, my character, Matt, meets Josh, a rather eccentric fellow in a red smiley face t-shirt who we later learn at least thinks he's Jesus. In the course of the film, they end up having a rather deep, far-ranging, and hopefully funny conversation about the nature of faith and of God, and football, and chocolate. The clip you just saw contains one of the more important points of the film, a point which actually ties into each of those 3 sermons that I watched on your website. Matt admits he doesn't believe in God, and Josh responds, "Oh, I don't believe in him either." What? "Oh, I believe in God. I just don't believe in the God that's the same God as the God that you don't believe in, too." We tend to divide ourselves very simplistically and without much thought into 2 distinct camps. I don't believe in God, or I do believe in God. Dick hinted at this a bit in his talk. Here are the criteria that make you a theist. Here are the criteria, then, that make you an atheist. It's binary, either or, yes or no. You fit in one box or the other. But I think that's really a bit of a false dichotomy. I don't believe in Apollo or Zeus. The ancient Romans and Greeks would have therefore considered me an atheist. But I believe in God. By the same token, I don't believe in Yahweh, or at least not the complete picture of the God Yahweh as presented in the Bible, a God who seems as often bloodthirsty, indecisive, and capricious as he does loving. A God who rather theatrically intervenes from the outside, but seemingly a lot more then than now. Many in the Christian tradition in which I was raised would therefore also consider me an atheist. But I believe in God. The question of God, then, is not that simple. I believe in God, I don't believe in God, these statements of faith, and I do consider I don't believe in God to be a statement of faith. You can ask me why later. These statements beg the question, what do you mean when you say God? Well, it turns out there have been and continue to be a multitude of answers to the question, who or what is God, depending on the era, the culture, or even the current political conditions. There's the God of the Abrahamic faiths, Christian, Jewish, Islamic. This is the one that most closely fits with Dick's theistic criteria, and the one I suspect that we all here rather unconsciously picture. One God, all-knowing, all-powerful, answers prayers, all good. But that's actually a relatively recent development in the history of mankind's conception of God, and as Angela suggested in her sermon, it's far from the only one, even today. The ancient Greeks and Romans, as I mentioned, had not one God, but many gods and goddesses. They did answer prayers, but they were certainly not all-powerful and all-knowing, and their promiscuity was literally legendary, suggesting that being all good was not a requirement for their divinity. The concept of deity, or perhaps I should say deities, in Hinduism has evolved over at least the last 2 millennia. Today it varies between schools of philosophy from a single personal God to 33 major deities to hundreds of deities, all with distinct and complex personalities, and therefore not all powerful or all knowing. Depending on what source you read, Buddhists don't believe in any God, or they believe in at least 19 of them. And even for many of the ancient Israelites, even some early Christians, according to both biblical sources and current-day historical research, even they believed in multiple gods, some more powerful than others, and some certainly more moral than others. As Karen Armstrong, the author of A History of God, writes, "The idea of God formed in one generation by one set of human beings could be meaningless in another. Indeed, the statement, 'I believe in God,' has no objective meaning as such, but like any other statement, only means something in context. Consequently, there is no one unchanging idea contained in the word God." So what then do I mean when I say that I believe in God, and why? Well, let's address that second question, the why, first. We'll get to the what a little later. Why do I believe in God, especially in a world, or at least a society, that is increasingly, and I think to some degree understandably, abandoning the idea of God as the relentless march of human progress explains more and more of the mysteries of the universe? I want to make two arguments here today for something beyond the paradigm of scientific material reductionism. One moral and one scientific, oddly enough. We'll start with the moral one. In his talk here last June, Dick made the following statement, quote, "The idea that you have to believe in God in order to be a good person, I will tell you quite frankly, that's bizarre to me," end quote. Now, here's one of those points with which I disagree. It would be bizarre, or at least logically inconsistent in my view, for any individual to adhere to morality without a belief in God, or at least in something outside of a purely materialistic view of reality, whether that something happened to fit into one of our customary definitions of God or not. Now, I want to emphasize, this is not to disparage anyone in this room who might consider themselves an atheist. I don't doubt your morality. In fact, I don't doubt the morality of any of the atheists I know, and I'm friends with a lot. I've just never understood the reason behind it. I find no logic to the position, and let me explain why. If we, as humans, are merely complex bags of chemical reactions and compounds, random products of a neutral physical reality and indifferent evolutionary forces, then there is no inherent moral or transcendent value to any of us, or frankly to anything. There are no laws governing the physical universe but those of physics, and no law in nature but survival of the fittest, and even those are not so much laws with all of that term's moral connotations, but rather simply facts. They're just how things work. There's no right or wrong. Like every single other element of physical reality, we simply are or we are not. We survive or we do not. And nature, the universe, cares not about any of it. Everything simply is what it is. To find moral value in a situation or a decision or even another being, therefore, requires one to look outside of nature, outside the physical world. One might argue that we, as humans, are different. We're set apart from the rest of the physical world. We are of value because we are conscious. We have feelings. But even that consciousness, those feelings, in the view of the pure scientific materialists, are merely illusions of chemistry and nerve synapses, feedback loops within the brain, accidents of evolution, present now only because they have conferred survival advantage in the past. Thus, they have no more inherent transcendent moral value than any other chemical reaction in the physical realm, which is to say they have none at all. And without any reality to the concepts of right or wrong, without any transcendent value attached to humanity, indeed to life in general, there's no logical motivation for individual behavior other than the most basic, pleasure or pain. There's no logical reason for anyone to be more concerned with the bag of organic chemicals that defines you in this way of thinking than with a bag of fertilizer. And yet I would say we're all a little uncomfortable with that idea, aren't we? We all do have a sense of right and wrong, though we may differ on the specifics. We all do value human life more than we do a rock or a mud pit or a bag of fertilizer. Well, why? Where does that uncomfortable feeling, that conscience, come from? Now, Dick offered an explanation for that from within the physical world, the world of nature, the amoral, not immoral, but amoral and deterministic world of evolution. He argued that most people, including atheists, do not steal, rape, and kill, quote, because societies evolve with basic morality, end quote. In other words, societies that adhere to a moral code have a survival advantage in their competition with others, and I think there's truth to that. But if that's all there is, then these so-called good behaviors are not based on any underlying moral imperative or concepts of inherent right and wrong, but simply on self-preservation. And that doesn't work on the individual level. Once you, as an individual, realize that concepts such as morality and right and wrong have no basis in reality but are merely illusions, accidents of evolution that have conferred increased survival fitness for societies that of themselves have no inherent or transcendent value because nothing does, then there's no logical reason for you as an individual to adhere to them. Now, I do not claim that religion holds the key to morally motivated behavior. Quite the contrary. Even in the Christian tradition in which I was raised, the motivation for good behavior that is predominantly preached by the church is not morality, but carrot and stick. If you do good things, you go to heaven. If you do bad things, you go to hell. Pleasure, pain, self-interest. And if an ostensibly moral life is, at its core, really about self-interest, is it truly moral? Is it truly fueled by a devotion to the ideals of right and wrong? I'd suggest not. So what is it then? What is it that gives the vast majority of us, as individuals, atheist or religious, an innate sense of right and wrong that goes beyond the values of the physical realm, simple pleasure and pain, survival of the fittest on a societal scale? Our parents, maybe? Our peers? Perhaps. But where did they get it? Ultimately, it must come from someplace outside of nature. And that, I would argue, whatever it is, wherever it comes from, that is your definition of God. That is the source of conscience. Conscience and its close relative, consciousness. My second argument for God, or at least a God of some sort, a scientific argument that surprisingly offers a legitimate rationale for authentically moral behavior and morality in all of our lives today. Consciousness. Dr. Kevin Perrone spoke about consciousness at this very podium back in August in his talk, Is Everything Conscious? It was a fascinating examination of both the history and science of the subject. And as the title implies, it made the argument that maybe, just maybe, everything, not just humans, but animals, plants, fungi, even inanimate objects, maybe everything has an element of consciousness to it. And this is not as out there or as easily dismissed as it at first might seem, even to the scientific community. Consciousness has been a thorn in the side of neurobiologists for quite some time. They've mapped the brain and can tell us where vision is experienced, where motor control is centered, where memories are stored. But no one has been able to locate consciousness. In fact, science has yet to come up with even a remotely plausible explanation of how consciousness developed, or even why, evolutionarily. It seems to be beyond nature, beyond the physical realm. Now, that doesn't mean that these questions won't eventually be answered in the traditional way. History is replete with mysteries initially assigned to the supernatural that have subsequently been scientifically explained within the confines of the physical realm. But a growing subset of researchers, such as Dr. Robert Lanza, adjunct professor at Wake Forest School of Medicine, and part of the team that cloned the first human embryo, by the way, and Dr. Donald Hoffman, professor of cognitive sciences at UC Irvine, are looking in a new direction for the keys to consciousness. Not outside of science, but outside the physical realm. Both argue on the basis of science that the world we perceive is not reality, but a highly inaccurate and incomplete construct within the mind. That the physical realm, at least on some levels, can be shown scientifically not to exist at all without an observer, and that therefore consciousness is not the product of the physical world, but the source. The brain is not the generator of consciousness, but merely the filter. Consciousness, these scientists argue, is the primary reality of the universe from which the physical world emerges. An underlying consciousness to the universe, a consciousness which generates us and everything that we deem to be reality, a unifying consciousness of which we are all a part, all tapped into. Now that's an interesting possibility of science, isn't it? And yes, it's just a possibility. As the previously mentioned Dr. Hoffman typically states in his interviews, I'm probably wrong, at least in part. Most ideas in human history start out that way. But what would it mean if even some of it were true? What would it mean to our sense of self-worth to know that we are all a part of that consciousness, that creative force in the universe, that we are neither merely insignificant collections of matter in a vast, oblivious universe, nor are we intrinsically flawed and worthless sinners, worthy of eternal damnation before we even set foot on this earth? What would it change in our relationships and treatment of others to know that, as many of the Eastern religions have long proclaimed, we and the earth beneath our feet and the heavens above us really are all one? That doing unto others is doing unto oneself. That caring for that possibly in some way conscious environment is caring for ourselves, not in some distant future, but innately in the here and now. What could that mean about love and respect and kindness and kinship and an underlying right and wrong to the universe that goes far beyond the simple laws of physics and the unconscious, uncaring, evolutionary imperatives of mere survival? And what could that consciousness, maybe not all powerful, maybe not all knowing, maybe not theistic or out there, but rather all around us and within us, that consciousness that literally creates reality that men and women have been trying to describe in their feeble, limited, inaccurate, and inadequate ways for thousands of years, what might that consciousness be called?
Quick word association. God.
What?
Oh, come on. I say God, what image pops into your head?
You're the one with the inside scoop. You tell me what he looks like.
Oddly enough, a little like George Burns.
Really?
Of course not. Come on. God. What do you see?
I don't know. Big guy, I guess.
Yeah, white beard, robes, sitting on a cloud.
Yeah, sure.
See, that's the problem. God doesn't want you to believe in some super smart, semi-transparent old guy in a toga. He wants you to believe in him.
Well, who's him then?
For starters, he's not a he.
He's not a he?
He's not a he.
He's a she?
Didn't say that.
Yeah, but you did say he's your father, right?
When?
Are you kidding? It's all over the Bible. My father this, my father that. You must have been a real buzzkill at parties.
Yeah. Except for that whole water into wine thing.
Yeah, that going for you, I guess. But still, okay, he's not a he, he's not a she. What is he, she, well, whatever.
God is.
Well, God is what?
Oh, no, that's it. Sorry. God simply is. Period. God is reality. He's not apart from the universe. He is the universe and more. He's the one in whom we live and move and have our being.
The 60s called. They want their lingo back.
Apostle Paul, 2,000 years ago.
Really?
Saw it on Wikipedia. Come on. The question isn't whether or not there's a God. The question is whether or not there's reality.
The defense so stipulates.
Oh, cool. So we agree that reality exists. We just differ on its nature.
What?
Well, is reality more than just the space-time continuum?
Oh boy, here we go. Beam me up, Scotty.
No, look, I already showed you with the cart there that reality might be less than you believed.
So?
So what if it's more? And what if that more? What if all of it is God?
Well, but still, if he's not just a he, then why father all the time? Why not mother?
The word God, and I get it, that given all the baggage that word has accumulated over the years. Theologians such as Marcus Borg have proposed the term the sacred instead, while others prefer the less religiously charged word source with a capital S. But whatever you call it, maybe that consciousness, which Dr. Perron spoke of, a consciousness which seems to permeate everything, is the true underlying fabric of reality. Maybe that consciousness is the source of reality rather than the result. And maybe that consciousness is what joins us together, gives meaning to life beyond mere survival, and moral weight to the ideals of right and wrong. Maybe that consciousness, which sits just at the edge of our finite human awareness, as a sense that there is something more, something deeper than the here and now, something which transcends our day-to-day lives and mere random chemical reactions in an infinitely large test tube. Maybe that consciousness is what humankind has been trying to comprehend and describe, imperfectly, albeit, in all our various and varying conceptions of God and gods through the millennia. Can God build a ladder that he can't climb? Perhaps. But perhaps that's not all that important. Perhaps the better question is, can God, or the sacred or source, our awakening awareness of a creative and unifying reality beyond and behind mere physical materialism, can that awareness build a better life for each of us and a better world for all of us together? Something to think about, I hope.